What is going on, everybody? Will here with From Screen to Shelf. Thank you for tuning in. Hope everybody's doing well. Happy New Year. Happy 2024. I wanted to hop on and talk about a movie that I finally had the chance to see earlier today. And this is a movie that I wanted to see after the holiday, after Christmas, but I was just so busy last week. I didn't really have time to get out to the theater, but I was happy to get out there, to have time to get out there today to check this movie out. And it's a movie I've been wanting to see for a while, folks. And that is the A24 biographical sports drama, The Iron Claw, which is based on the life of professional wrestlers, the Von Erich brothers. Now, just to give you guys some context, I grew up with wrestling. I haven't watched it in many years. Um, I'd say the last time I watched wrestling religiously was probably when I was in high school. And it has been, that's we're looking at like 13, 14 years ago now. Um, More than that, 15 years ago, I should say. And when I started getting into wrestling, it was like, I want to say 98 or 99. And by that time, I believe, from what I remember, the Attitude Era was in full swing. So, although the Von Erich brothers weren't part of the generation of wrestlers that I grew up watching, when I got older, when I got into high school, and I started discovering, not only was I discovering wrestlers from movies like Roddy Piper and Jesse the Body Ventura from Predator, and They Live, respectively. I was going back and kind of researching the late 70s and the early 80s, and then the mid to late 80s and the early 90s, and pretty much, going back and exploring and venturing into those time periods of wrestling leading up to the era of wrestling that I started tuning into, which was the Attitude Era, right? And looking back, I remember discovering all these different wrestlers that were kind of like larger than life to me. Ric Flair, Bret Hart, Dusty Rhodes, who's mentioned in this film, just to name a few, and so many more. I mean, countless others that were just these, again, like larger than life characters to me, and I was fascinated by that world. I was fascinated by all of these guys. Some of whom became inspirations for me, and provided me with motivation in my life, growing up. So, to have a movie about the Von Erich brothers, whom many consider to be, I mean, their impact on the world of professional wrestling to this day is I think unquestionable. Undoubtedly, everlasting. But what I love about the Iron Claw is, it focuses on that spectacle. It focuses on that rise to fame and notoriety, and that success. But it also showcases the dark side of that, and the sheer tragedy that this family went through. Um, Especially Kevin, who's played by Zach Efron. So we kind of see the events in this movie play out through Kevin Von Erich's perspective. Now, the film starts off, it touches briefly on, we see a moment in Fritz Von Erich's career. Fritz is their father, who's, again, he's very kind of like tough loving guy, very domineering father. The way that he raises the boys is pretty much, it's one of those situations where it's like, everybody's got to be the best. There's a there's a line in there where they're having dinner at the table, and he talks about who his favorite son is, and he's like, right now it's Kevin or Kerry, followed by Kevin, and then Mike and David, and so on and so forth. But the rankings can always change. So from the get go, we are kind of given this idea of who he is as a father, and how he kind of uses I guess we can say his success to kind of instill this mentality in his sons, in the brothers, that they need to be the best they can be. They need to. Everybody's got to shoot to be the champion. And that's mentioned a few different times. There's a specific line of dialogue. I'm trying to remember exactly how it's said. But he's like, you want to be the best, you got to fight for it. You got to be the best. That's the only way to survive is to become the best. And keep pushing. You know, which can be motivating in one way, but it also plays into the immense pressure that I think the Von Erich brothers endured. A lot of which was put on them, by their father Fritz. But we get like a short glimpse into Fritz's career back in the day when he was wrestling, and that's kind of presented in black and white. The rest of the film is in color, and it mostly follows Kevin Von Erich. Now, I will say I wanna mention this for people that are unaware, because one of the things that a lot of wrestling fans have been mentioning is that this movie doesn't include one of the Von Erich brothers, and that is Chris. Now, according to the director, Sean Durkin, the reason Chris is not in the movie, the reason his character isn't in the film is due to runtime. They decided for whatever reason to exclude his character from the film for the sake of the length of the script, I guess, or the screenplay, in order to kind of keep the movie's runtime at around 2 hours. And I think it's like 2 hours and 12 minutes or something like that. So they're just over that mark. Um, but he is excluded from the film, and seemingly some of the elements from his arc are included in Mike Von Erich's arc. So they took some of those elements from Chris's life and kind of combined them with Mike Von Erich. Um, but yeah, I mean, in real life, there's six brothers in total. You have Kevin, Kerry, David, Mike, Chris, and then Jack, who I believe was one of their brothers who passed away at a young age. But Chris is the only brother that is not mentioned in the film. So in the movie, we have Kevin, Kerry, David, Mike, and Jack. And Kevin is kind of seen as again, we're seeing things play out really from his perspective, right? Um, so we have him training to be champion at the local league that they're playing in, the regional league that they're wrestling in Texas, which is where the family lives. And Kerry, who was, he was an Olympian prior to, getting into wrestling. I believe he was training for the Olympics. And then, there was an event, due to the Cold War, the Olympics being shut down. He ends up joining the other two brothers, Kevin and David. And Mike is kind of the fourth main brother in the film, and he's not necessarily following in the footsteps or in the mold that the other brothers are. And that obviously becomes somewhat of a point of contention with his father Fritz, and he's more creative, right? He's in a band and he's playing music, and he kind of wants to pursue that lifestyle. Um, but what I found most heartwarming about this movie is the grace in which some of the content is handled. Now, I will say the performances in this film across the board absolutely fantastic. Cinematography is great. This movie is very well shot. I'm not sure who the DP was on this, but the director did a fantastic job. Sean Durkin, writer and director. I think he nailed this. I will say this is Zac Efron's best performance, hands down. If he is not nominated for an Oscar for this, that'll be a shame. He absolutely kills it. Jeremy Allen White is fantastic. I think David is played by a gentleman named Harris Dickinson. I'm not entirely familiar with him. I forget who plays their mother, Doris, but Fritz is played, as I said, by excuse me, Holt McElhaney. Everybody is great in this. And I forget who plays Kevin Von Erich's girlfriend. And they obviously end up getting married and they have a couple children together. But performances fantastic across the board. Zac Efron kills it. Jeremy Allen White kills it. The two of them more so than everyone else. They're the standout performances in this movie, folks. Zac Efron just his performance floored me. Um, there's a line of dialogue that's spoken at the end of the movie that pretty much encapsulates how he feels, um, having lost his brothers. And there are scenes in this movie that are very emotional. You know, the first half of the film is kind of their rise to fame, and starting with Kevin more so, and then we see David. We see how David gets involved in the business and in wrestling, and then Carrie. You know, after realizing that the Olympics is not going to happen due to world events at the time, he ends up joining the other two brothers and they kind of form this tag team, right? Um, and pretty much rise up through the ranks, and it's interesting because there's another dynamic at play. That competition dynamic really comes into play and becomes a point of contention between the brothers when David essentially kind of surpasses Kevin in terms of achieving that level where he gets to go to Tokyo and wrestle against Ric Flair. But again, if you're familiar with the life of the Von Erich family, you know how that went down. And I don't want to give away any spoilers for anybody that hasn't seen this movie, but um, let's just say the trip to Tokyo does not go as planned, and ends in tragedy, and that's where I'll kind of leave that. But it's the tragedy that really kind of sells this movie uh, to us, and it's really Kevin Von Erich's perspective. So it's kind of his reaction to these events, um, that really carries the film. And I got to give credit to Zac Efron. It's his performance that really sells it to us. And I will say there are moments where I was trying my best to not get emotional. I'm trying not to get emotional now because everything is so fresh in my mind that I'm just remembering, the audio and the visuals, and I'm trying not to get flustered. But there are moments when, there's a death of another brother, for example, and Kevin Von Erich is kind of daydreaming and he's imagining uh, the scenario where all of his brothers are together. And that almost got me. And I thought that was really beautifully done. That was a nice, graceful tribute um, to the brothers. And apparently, the actual Kevin Von Erich, when he saw this film, when he saw the premiere, word is that he actually got up and almost left the theater during that scene because it hit him so hard. And yeah, I'm getting emotional, guys, because what I'm thinking of is the ending of this film, and it's Kevin Von Erich sitting in his yard watching his two sons play football, and his two boys are tossing the football back and forth, and he's just sitting there crying. He's just bawling, and his sons notice that he's crying, and they run over to him. And they're like, "Daddy, what's wrong? Are you okay?" And the line they when they ask him if he's okay, the words that come out of his mouth, that line of dialogue right there, folks, towards the end of the film is what broke me. Um, I just I just fucking broke down. I just broke down in the theater, man. It's like this is one of those movies where it's like, "Oh no," like, it's like they're going there, and you're sitting there like, don't let like, don't let it out. Don't cry. You're not gonna cry. You're not gonna get emotional. And I did a pretty damn good job up until that last line just fucking got me. It just got me. But what a movie. What a movie. Now, I want to throw this out there. There are some creative decisions I didn't necessarily agree with. Um, one of them being obviously the exclusion of Chris. I felt that they could have included his character. I felt that I'm sure there was a way they could have included him in the film that didn't detract from the story that we got, right? I do think his story is important. He was a part of the family, and I think it would have been beneficial to have some of that in there. That being said, I'm more forgiving of that decision because I understand, runtime is a thing, and according to Sean Durkin, it was a very hard decision to make. Um, it's not something he wanted to do. It's just, sometimes in the business when you're trying to make a movie and you're only allotted a certain amount of time and budget, decisions have to be made. So I can understand that. But the one thing in this movie that really threw me off, to be completely honest, and I'm sure there's other people out there that agree with this, is the casting of Ric Flair. Ric Flair makes an appearance in this film, and I do not agree with the casting of his character. I think the actor that they got to play Ric Flair just wasn't right for that role, and that is, I say that with utmost respect to the actor that was chosen, but I just that casting choice did not work in my opinion. Other than that, I love this movie. I love this movie. If you're a fan of wrestling, definitely go see this. If you're a fan of wrestling, you're probably already going to go see this. And if you're in any way, shape, or form familiar with the Von Erich family and the Von Erich brothers, you're probably already planning to see this. But if you're not a fan of wrestling, I think this is still a fantastic drama film. Um, it's definitely going to be an easier sell to fans of the sport and people that are familiar with the Von Erich brothers. As I said, it's definitely going to be more digestible to those people. If you're someone who's on the outside, kind of looking in, and you've never watched wrestling in your life, and you're not a fan, I still think there's a movie to be had here. I still think it's a really enjoyable, just a really emotional ride. Um, and yeah, it really tugs at your heartstrings, really does. So yeah, I hope that Zac Efron is nominated for an Oscar. I think he deserves it. I think he carried this movie incredibly well. Um, I think he was a fantastic ambassador. Um, Someone who I think carried the torch incredibly well, not only um, representing Kevin Von Erich, the person, um, but kind of being a guide and kind of being a mentor to the other brothers, as he was apparently on set, according to some interviews with like Jeremy Allen White. They talk about how motivating Zac Efron was as an actor, behind the scenes, during the making of this movie. And I think that shows in his performance. He really is somebody. His character, that is somebody who he cares about his family. And he just, it's like he says in the movie. It's like, his girlfriend asks him what he wants to do and like what he wants out of life, and he says he's like, I just want to be with my brothers. I just want to be with my family. Um, so yeah, fantastic performance by Zac Efron. Cannot say enough good things about him. Jeremy Allen White killed it. Everybody was good in this movie. There was not a bad performance in this film. Cinematography was fantastic. The soundtrack, the score was awesome. We get songs from like Rush, a lot of like late 70s, 80s music in this film. Um, and even to their walkout song, Tom Sawyer. Um, but yeah, man, awesome film. Check it out. Highly recommend it. If you can see it in a theater, do so. It'll probably be in theaters a little while longer. And I'm really hoping for a physical media release down the line, folks. I will buy this movie day one. So I know with A24, it's weird. They don't release a lot of their stuff on physical media. So I'm hoping that we get a physical release for this movie because I would be stoked to add it to the collection. But yeah, that's my recommendation. I do have a letterbox review posted for this. I will link that in the video down below. Let me know what you guys think. If you guys saw the movie, if you're interested in checking it out, I'd like to hear your thoughts. So comment down below. And as always, if you like the content that you saw today, if you like what else we're putting out on the channel, stay tuned for more. Hit that like button, subscribe, hit that notification bell. That way, every time we post new content, you guys can get notified. You guys can get alerted. Hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. We'll see you guys soon. Thank you.